and I'm just going into that moving down that creative space as much as possible, teaching people and sort of doing it and teaching it. I'm a teacher by trade. I used to be a teacher, so
All right.
that sort of area of doing and then teaching the doing, helping
Cool
people
as.
unlock their creativity, all of that good stuff.
Were you a poet in primary school? Sorry, a teacher in primary school or in high school? Or
High school, but then I went and did replacement teaching. Tell you what, if you want to get good at capturing an audience, do replacement teaching because you get very good at the uh, grabbing attention. What's the most important thing that a replacement teacher has to do? It's like they have to engage. It has to be fucking engaging. Otherwise, the kids switch out, and then you're getting shit thrown at you. So you very quickly learn to nothing else matters. None of the crap that they teach you of how to teach matters. It's engagement. Be
gotcha.
interesting.
Right off the bat, you haven't got time. You just got to capture them and just get going.
Just just got to get.
How, tell me some like a bit of the background of yourself, like how you got into poetry, like creative thinking, and what sort of like drawn you along this path? Because you've got a really interesting background there.
Yeah, so it sort of is a function of the background. I had quite a traumatic childhood. I moved out of home at 16. My father was an addict and a drug dealer.
Mm.
And it just wasn't safe in that home environment. And all through school, I was sort of a typical left brain thinker. So like maths, like hard, straight maths. Maths made sense. It was a point of like logical, focused, this is what works. Right answer, wrong answer, go. And all the literature and the English and the poetry felt like wanky bullshit that dead white men uh, spoke about that the teacher didn't understand and couldn't teach, and it just went straight over my head. And it just didn't resonate, which is a shame because I was hurting. And me now is like, hey, past you need to speak, you need to open up, you need to express. Doing it now, but it's sort of like would have been better back then. Um,
Yeah.
and then like years later, I met my partner who's a poet, and she was the first person whose poetry resonated, and she explained poetry to me in a way that just broke through all the barriers. And basically, all she said was, "It's freedom. You can express however you want to express."
Mm.
And she showed me poetry that resonated with me. Um, 10 years later, 12 years later, whatever, we're still together. So that worked. Find yourself a poetess as a wife.
That's
Um,
awesome. Yeah.
but yeah, now my mind sort of flipped completely to the right brain thinking, down the full creativity, and I'm still okay with maths, but it's sort of quite boring now for me.
Gotcha. So you were like in into like hardcore right brain sort of activities right up until you sort of met your partner.
Oh, look, uni was a sort of a bit of a sort of moving point. Like, uni crushes your soul and it forces all of the creativity into a deep, dark hole and stops you from writing anything other than what it wants you to write. And once
Yeah.
that opened up, and at the same time I met my partner, it's like, okay, now we can diverge down the more creativity path. So
Yeah.
it's a transition, but yeah, it was sort of like strictly left brain and then now almost exclusively right brain.
Yeah, that's bloody awesome. What kind of stuff did your partner get into in terms of her poetry and how she sort of expressed her creative outlet?
She used to write quite a lot, and then she stopped. Once again, uni crushed her soul. It's very this is like an feels like an anti university message. Do it if you want to do it, but if you want to be creative, it's probably going to crush a bit of your soul. Just saying. Um, so she shared with me her older work, and I'm actually in the process of helping her republish her old stuff and sort of reclaiming those old poems in a sort of a republished situation now with some new stuff to sort of get her back into it. And she's been writing it ever so sporadically. We've had a couple of kids, that takes it out of you as well, but
Hmm.
she's getting back into it. So I'm sort of, I've published like I think 11, 12 books now. So I'm going to, once she collates her work, I'll be able to get it out there and be like, hey, this is good poetry. Because, it's very hard to sort of look at yourself objectively. I can see what people are telling me about my stuff, but it's still, you see the problems behind the piece of art, whereas other people just see the art. And I can see that
Yeah.
her art is beautiful, so I'm going to bring that to the world
And you
and
can
help
feel that
other
same
people
kind
bring it
of
to the
thing
world as
behind her
well.
too.
Yeah, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you feel like she struggles a lot with that sort of acceptance of other people's thoughts on her work?
She hasn't really shared it too much with the public. She shared it on a few apps here and there, and she's received pretty good feedback. It's until you get feedback that is harsh or quite negative that it impacts you. Can I tell you a little story?
Yeah, please do.
So I released. There's a poem that I've written called "Do You Love Me or the Idea of Me?" And the idea is that those words were said to me by an ex because she was saying like, "Do you love me?" or the made up belief that you've got in my head about me. And at the time,
Mm.
I'm like, no, I love you. But upon thinking about it in post breakup, I did love the idea about her, not necessarily her. And the poem is an expression of that feeling. And I posted that on a few different places at once. And one person messaged me the like same day, two polar opposite feedbacks.
Mm.
She's like, you've revolutionized, or like you've stated exactly how I feel. Perfect expression of a feeling, gushing. I'm like, oh, great. Open up the next app. You're pathetic. Anyone like that is pathetic. And just da 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 da. Same poem, same day, polar opposite feedbacks, just bang. It was great.
Wow, right. It's great. That's unreal. And what did you take from that? Like, what was that feeling like inside for you?
Part of me wants to take it. There's a quote that I heard that suggests you are not as good or as bad as they say you are.
Mm.
So you put yourself out there in the public sphere, and people can just take your art and do what they want with it. And some will love it, and some will hate it.
Mm.
And I guess it's like, so there's a bit of that. It's a bit of the idea of like, if people are talking about it, they've resonated with it enough to respond. Like any publicity is good publicity, or like what's the line? Screams from the haters have got a nice ring to it, sort of situation. But the other part is the general human consensus that it's far easier to ignore positive praise and far easier to sit in the negative
Mm.
because we've evolved to focus on the negative. There was a study that suggests if someone steals or takes or you lose $50, the equivalent positive feeling you need to have found $500 or $5,000 to move you in
Yeah.
the same way. You'll still be hung up over losing the $50, even if
Yeah.
on that same day you found $100 or $200. You're still angry
Yeah,
disproportionately.
right.
It's not logical. And this is the left brain, right brain. When I was growing up, and it was like this is like sort of black and white thinking and just running from trauma effectively. It's like I wanted things just to make sense, and
Mm.
it's taken me a long time to grasp the idea that humans are not logical, even though
Right.
we think we are. I'm not logical, and seeing my own illogicality is quite entertaining.
That's a really interesting area to get into. Do you find, was there a couple of like major turning points for you, sort of realizing that we're not sort of logical beings, what the experiences were like going through that?
I mean, I've got a pretty public journey with mental health. I share my ups and downs over time, all the time, not just through poetry, just literally stating, here's what I am, here's how I am. So I can
Mm.
look back over and see that, when I'm feeling like I'm going good, it's like, oh, you're about to get fucked over, son. Right? Like, so it's not like there's a particular turning point. There is a book that sort of highlighted this to me. Have you ever heard of the comic Dilbert?
Gilbert.
Obscure Dilbert. Doesn't matter. The author of this webcomic wrote a book about Donald Trump called Win Bigly. And his premise was he was one of the first people to put out there that Trump was going to win. He wasn't a Trump supporter. This
Mhm.
guy was just a master manipulator. He was a hypnotist. And he put out this book. It's a fascinating book because he's talking about how Trump manipulated people to win the election.
Yeah.
So it's not a pro Trump thing. It's just it's fascinating from a communication perspective. You'd probably love it. And he put out there this idea that people believe we're 90% rational and 10% irrational, but he thinks that it's actually we've got 10% rationality over the top of 90% irrationality. And I meditate daily, and I start to like detach and seeing myself, and it's like, oh shit, what you said then, what you did then has no basis. It just arose and you just acted.
Mm.
The more I see that, the more I realize I'm like, oh shit, there's not necessarily someone sane driving this ship. Do you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've gone through a lot of experiences myself with that. So growing through, like, my father come from a trade background, and all of his words and the things that he spoke about were all very logical. So it became easy to like listen to his thoughts of this is how you should act in front of people. When you're driving a car, you need to like look 10 cars ahead to see if there's an accident. But then a lot of his reactions were very sporadic and in the moment. So he'd be looking at his phone and something wouldn't work on it. So he'd get super mad and smash the thing on the ground and then be back to normal again. And so looking from the sides, like, my God, what just happened there? None of this actually adds up and makes sense. So growing up through
No,
like
and that's it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. Like emotionality. Emotions aren't rational,
Mm,
right? Like they you can rationally sort of talk about emotions, but when you have them, there's an analogy that I like is that it's like the drunk analogy. Yeah, like are you drunk now? No. Are you okay to drive? Yes. But if I was to ask you after you've had a couple of drinks, I'm not asking sober you to judge. I'm asking drunk you to judge, and drunk you has to decide if you're drunk or not.
mm,
But it's not like so like sober you could judge you, but sober you isn't doing the judging. You're impaired, and it's the same thing with like anger. If I asked you, if I asked you to, how are you feeling? How do you respond to this, yada, yada, you can tell me. But if you're
mm.
angry, you might not realize just how angry you are. The emotion clouds the thing judging. The thing's doing the judgment itself is
Yeah.
impacted by the emotion, by the drug, by the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's in that sort of conscious state where we're sort of sitting down and like going back through memories. We've sort of got really clear on what we're sort of thinking. We can sort of find a rational reason why we've done it all. But then as soon as we get put ourselves back into that moment, it's like it all disappears again. We're just suddenly just going with the flow or reacting to whoever we're talking to.
100%. And like, I mean, I'll wake up from dreams and it's like that dream was real. It felt
Mm,
real. And I know it's a dream. And yet the feeling feels just as real, if not more real than the waking life that I'm currently living in that moment.
hmm. Yeah.
Consciousness didn't just come about, right? It evolved over time, layer upon layer upon layer, and then all of a sudden the human animal is self-aware. The self-awareness, whatever consciousness isn't like a machine. It's not like a program that's perfectly been designed. It's built up layer upon layer over time, right?
Mm.
So it's not rational. There's no singular point. There's so many flaws and faults, and we try to look at it from this rational, right, left brain perspective, and it just doesn't make sense. Thus the poetry, thus the
Gotcha.
play, thus the art.
Your mind works in a very interesting way. It's like explaining before how you've come from a very like structured sort of thinking sort of background, getting into mathematics and those kind of areas. Where now, like just through this conversation, as you're bringing up analogies and sort of ideas, and you're just like pulling and grabbing sort of ideas just from wherever they're coming from all the time. And it seemed like you've made a almost like a total transition from that everything's in a linear track to just expansive thinking from all different ways. Is that something that
Well,
you've consciously chosen to?
two answers. Okay, maybe I'm just very good at masking, and I've read a lot of books. Right, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
Seriously, right? Like look behind me. I'm constantly reading and constantly consuming content. Yeah,
Mm,
so it could be that I'm just very good at masking. Maybe. I have made an effort to read, and I'm still reading books on the sales process, on like how to win friends and influence people. Like that sort of like the subtle art of not giving a fuck, or what's the Mark Manson one? Models. Like I've read all of those books, right?
mm,
Because I'm like, okay, how do the normies, the non-traumatized, the whatever, that people just seem to, maybe it's not anxious. Like I'm not quite sure where if there's a diagnosis here of trauma, of anxiety, of neurodivergence, of just a neurotic personality, right? Whatever the reason is.
yeah.
So I've read down all of these different paths. And then I'm also very curious. It's like the writer in me wants to be able to write characters. So I'll observe, but it's also a dissociation factor. So like there's a lot going on here, right? I'll be in a group and I'll notice that someone's the center of attention. And part of me's engaging. And I'm like, what is making that person the center of the attention? Why
Mm,
is everyone leaning in and giving a shit about that person? Where, Joe over there is, he's three times he's tried to say something and join in, and no one even gives a shit. No one pays attention, or it's fleeting.
Yeah.
And I'm just like sort of asking myself that question, like what's going on here, and then I'm tying it back in. So that sort of does sound like masking, but then it also sounds like an author doing research on how to write characters, right? It also
Right.
sounds like someone who was neglected, who wasn't shown social skills from the father, trying to learn, how the humans do it, right? Because I haven't had that. Do you sort of see what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And beyond that, it's just a matter of just being a consummate nerd. I just constantly consuming information.
Yeah.
Um, because it helps. And then in terms of like drawing references from everywhere, um, yeah, it's like the more references I have, I think you might have heard it at Miroslav's event. I don't know if it was said there, it was said in one of the events, range, he who has the most range wins,
Yeah.
right? The idea being that if you can go dark, you can go light, you can go up, you can go down, you can engage in different areas,
Mhm.
you can engage with people on a different aspects. So my view is that the wider my range is of references to draw from,
Mm.
the more I will be able to interact with people on their level, at their level. Does that make
Right.
sense? Like if it wasn't you, because I know you've got an interest in social dynamics and all of this sort of stuff, obviously, I wouldn't go down this path.
Yeah.
Maybe if it was like a spiritual discussion, I could go talk about the various spiritual books I've read in the different religions. If it was, yeah. So it's like I'm just, yeah. So I don't know. There's a long-winded answer that probably amounts to neuroticism.
It comes off often a lot of good sort of areas though. Like you mentioned a
Yeah,
few times there like about the masking side of it. Do you feel like it's sort of a cover for something else?
I've once again I've had like a lot of therapy,
Mm.
and in my therapy sessions, I've asked every question from, am I a sociopath? Because I would block off stuff. Am I autistic? Because I would struggle socially and not look people in the eyes. And and like all of these things would come along, and you
Mm.
know, it's a function of trauma.
What are your
When
thoughts at the moment? What do you believe now?
I think that the major problem I have is social anxiety and
Mm.
complex post traumatic stress. That was like, and that seems to fit like the childhood environment. My every not every day when I was in his house, addicts would come to the house, volatile people. When you see someone
Mm.
sort of like a homeless person, they're like erratic and like they're just a bit sort of sketchy. You don't feel safe.
Yeah.
That person's coming into the home, and I sort of had to entertain this person until once my dad got the stuff, sort of thing. And then moving out of home at 16 was quite scary for different ways. So it's like I initially blocked off, and this is what, like, I would block myself off. I don't feel anything. That was what I was telling myself, and it
Mm.
wasn't that I wasn't feeling anything. It was that I had to not feel anything to survive,
Mm.
right? And then once those feelings came out, it's like, oh my god, I'm feeling too much. So then it's like I'm having like meltdowns, similar to sort of like one psychologist suggested borderline personality disorder, or like sort of manic depressive, right? The subtext here is find a good therapist that knows what they're doing and you resonate with, because I've been through 5 shit ones and they're shit for various reasons.
Yeah.
I can go into that if you want. It's a big story, but we cycled back around, and it's social anxiety. Why do I struggle looking at people in the eyes? Because I'm
Mm.
scanning the environment for danger, right? That's what I was
Mm.
trained to do. Why do I struggle to connect and resonate with feelings? Because I've spent the good portion of my life suppressing those feelings hardcore because it hurt too much,
Mm.
right? Why do I have meltdowns? It's like, well, because things become so overwhelmed because I'm constantly on edge and tense. Now, once again, all of those, why do I not understand social dynamics all the time? Well, my father was fully neglectful, stoned on the couch all the time. So I didn't have constant engagement. So it's like you can sort of like, but once again,
Yeah.
like I've studied psychology, so it's like you're looking into the Venn diagram of diagnoses, and it all fits. So it's a matter of what's working. Well, I'm on a medication for anti-anxiety, and my anxiety's dropping. Funny
Right.
that. I'm I'm doing calm breathing and meditations to lower the anxiety, and it's working. Funny that,
Mm.
right? It's sort of, but that's taken a good 20 odd years of pretty consistent therapy and self work to get to.
Yeah, to dig down.
And before that, it's like it's yeah, like looking at the books and the podcasts,
Do you mind if we,
finding people online that I can. So
or would you feel comfortable if we
go on.
go a bit sort of deeper down that sort of path? Just in like sort of
Yeah, which path going?
your sort of like personal experience growing up and like what your parents were like, what the environment was like around you for yeah growing up. There's
Look,
some.
I've written. Yeah, no, it's all good.
Mm,
The first book I wrote was called Under the Influence: Reclaiming My Childhood, and it took me
mm,
about 2 years to write. It was a job, and it doing that, I wrote it just after my father passed. He passed away at 59, from like health reasons. Basically, he was an unhealthy sort of person.
mm,
Drug use, smoking, and in there, I sort of chronicled the most embarrassing and traumatizing moments that I could remember. And here's the thing, like I don't have that good a memory of my past. I don't really it's not really chronological. It's like this like a significant event, nothing, 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 significant event, nothing, nothing, nothing. Do you know what I
mm.
mean? So
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
and that's what the book became. And one of the feedbacks I got was this isn't like they said it's good, but it's not really an autobiography. And I'm like, it's not. It's just it's me. The pages the therapist, which is what I coach people with now.
Mm,
Um, is and like I did it for myself, and like it fucking hurt, but that has allowed me to open up and heal. So like people ask, am I happy to go down it? And I'm like, I sort of am, but I can't quite give you a clear view of what it would look like. I can sort of give you generalities, but it's not the
mm.
exact story. And I mean, compressing anything into that would make sense, but
No, that's fine. What it's like looking into like what comes up for you, if there's any like particular moments that stand out for you and experiences that like pop up.
yeah, sure. So one of the moments was when I realized that my dad was dealing, because when you're young, you're oblivious to things. You don't quite realize it's just normal. And I
Mm,
remember going, "Oh fuck, my dad has a lot of friends. Like always, people are just coming by, just popping in, popping out, popping in, popping out." And like we would be in the car, and he'd be like, we'd be on the way to the beach or to do something together. And he's like, "Oh, I've just got to stop in at a couple of friends' house on the way."
mm,
So we're in the car, and he's drug dealing with us, driving us to this place, dropping it off for them, or they're coming to the house. And I just thought that was normal. Like, fuck, he's very popular sort of bloke. And then the penny dropped, and I'm like, oh shit. And it sort of became a significant aspect of shame. I went from you sort of idolize your parents, and then you realize that they're not that great. But
mm,
this went from just sort of a boyhood fantasy, unknowing, really young, I'm talking here, to going, oh shit, my father's actually like a criminal, and like quite, like he's it's not it's pretty bad, and that
mm.
was it's a hard pill to swallow. um it really is, and there's like a whole variety of different stories, but I always, it's just, he was always popping into people, and it was interesting to me to look back upon that and see the change. It's the same behavior, but
Yeah.
when I knew what was happening, that behavior hurt.
How did that sort of change you once you sort of started to see that?
Well, it's a gradual moving away. Like I said, I moved out of home at 16. There was other issues with my mum's side. I'm not going to go into that here, but
Mhm.
it was untenable to live at either house. They'd broken up, mum and dad,
Were you closer to your
and
mother or father?
yeah, I was close to my mum, but it wasn't ideal in her house either, for other reasons. And it's like I felt like I had nowhere to go. So yeah, it was it was a bit rough.
Mm. So there's a lot of areas this sort of goes into. I appreciate you going into this, by the way, because um, I feel like it's a very powerful area to explore for, and a lot of people that don't really get the chance and experience to explore that side of their life. We sort of get stuck into the habits of getting by to sort of cover a lot of the traumas and experiences we've been through. And through those habits, we lose track of everything else that's going on. So we think more about the future or more about the sort of what's going on in social media, and sort of very, very seldom do we get to like look back into the past and go like, what sort of led me up to this point? Why do I feel these kind of experiences? Why am I struggling in this kind of area of my life? And it's for you to like go through and share these sides of your experience. Not only does it feel like a sort of I don't know, special to me, because it's like seeing the kind of areas where our lives sort of line up and sort of match through, as well as I think for a lot of people like that'd be watching this, be able to relate in that similar kind of way, because it's easy to sort of see a lot of people out there, everyone else in at school and through our job and through our experiences, as they've got a really good life and they're not struggling, they're just getting by like so easily. But it's once you start to get to know people more and more, you realize that everyone's struggling, everyone's going through their own shit, everyone's sort of fucked up in some kind of way, and it's yeah, it's sort of having these kind of conversations makes it go, oh shit, this is actually real. So yeah, really appreciate that.
Yeah, look, that's my pleasure. There's a couple of things I want to touch upon there. The idea that everyone's fucked up. I used to think that, when I was, younger, it's like, oh, woe is me. And I still do. I've still got like a victim complex. I'm aware of it now though. But like, no one's unscathed, no one's untraumatized, no one has had a perfect life. We've all been fucked up in some capacity. But then also knowing that you can heal and you can take steps. Once again, like I suggest, traditional, like, modern medicine, therapy, medication if you need to, also medication, and also what I'm putting out there and offering people with coaching, which is like writing and, writing therapy effectively, or, crafting poems, because the more you sort of craft poetry, the more you sort of play with these thoughts, the more you dig in, the more you heal. It's a bit painful, but ultimately it helps you to move through. And the other thing I wanted to address of what you said was the idea of these, you get into these ruts to survive, or these grooves, right? And I've written about that in a couple of different ways, because those rituals that you use to survive are beautiful and they help, but they're also trapping as well. It's like I found myself needing to get up and exercise and meditate and calm breathe and do all of these other things just to survive another day, to be able to go to sleep, to wake up, to do it again. That suggests to me that something's fundamentally wrong. And the only way I recognized that was it came out as a poem. Do you know what I mean? It came out as a piece of poetry. And it's sort of like, okay, so like it's a way to sort of detach and step back and look at yourself and go, oh shit, stuff's real. Like this is what's actually happening in my mind. I'm working on a poem now because like I said, I've just started medication. But I'm not 100% happy with it. Like I advocate, like, use it if you need to, but I'm using it. I'm not happy. I'm not 100% happy. I don't like that I have to. So it might change, but this is roughly what I'm doing with the poem. Every time I swallow my medication, I must also swallow the implicit belief that either I cannot function unaided in this world, or that the world itself is so dysfunctional that I must alter myself to survive. Either way, I'm forced to swallow, and I'm not entirely happy about it. And that's like, you can take, once you put the poems out there, the people take it as they like. But I know that if I put that out, people that are taking medication will resonate with it, and it helps me to sort of explore my thoughts and put them onto the page. You're in the process of writing a book right now. Like, you're getting the thoughts out onto the page and organizing it.
Yeah.
This is like doing that. Maybe what you're seeing when you're saying like, oh, my brain's like structured funny, like, or like in a good way.
Yeah.
That you're seeing the workings of me having sorted my thoughts and put them onto, played with them on the page somewhat, because I realize now, like, just having read that poem to you, I've now played and processed, like, thought a little bit more deeply on the concept of medication, rather than just accepting it and just taking it. I'm going, well, what does this actually mean for me? How do I feel about that process? Oh, I'm gonna, and like me talking that out, because I do feel like the world's fucked, and it should be different, right? We didn't evolve to live in mega cities with millions of people. It's fucked. So maybe that's what the problem is, or maybe I am the problem. Like, I don't know, but like I've thought about that a bit more now.
Yeah, gotcha. So a lot of different questions come up with that. Um, yeah,
Go
but
for it. Go deep. Dig deeper.
yeah, the way your sort of mind works, like where sort of some of the things I was saying was you've got both that sort of linear track thinking. You've managed to hold on to that side of keeping um, a line through what's going on, but you're also able to just abstractly sort of connect ideas and connect sort of stories along with it without sort of losing track of that sort of core sort of thinking that you've got going. So
Yeah, that's look, honestly, that's probably a function of trauma as well. This idea of being able to hold on to thoughts and go, okay, I'm going to remember this whilst I'm talking about this, bringing in points and bringing it back to that first point and sort of tying it in a loop.
mhm.
Um, if you have arguments with your family again and again and again, where you're trying to prove who was right and what was said, and that sort of thing, you get very good at remembering what you've said and to walking people through that process and be like, hang on, you're going off on this tangent, but that's not actually what we're talking about. What we're talking about is this. I
Right.
said this other thing. You responded in that way, but that didn't make sense because of this third thing over here that you did yesterday. And it's like it's look, it's not fun. Like that's not a fun situation in any sense. It's fucking terrible, and it wouldn't be good if we could all just communicate and get along. But um nowadays that's translated into a skill set of being able to work with poetry, work with free flow expression, work with communication, and hold on to the stuff at the start of the conversation and bring
Mm.
it back. It's like I can put that piece there. And what I'm just starting to get into now is like free form poetry or free form expression, rhyme prov. I don't know exactly what the word is, but just having it come and then being able to tie it back into a general theme is the art. But
Mm.
the dissection of that is that it's a bit of a trick. Like I've written so many poems that I know roughly what rhymes go together, right? So like because I've written poetry that rhymes with a certain end word. So for example, if I said express, right? I've written a bunch of poems with the word express in it. Express, compress, depress, mess, excess, right? So they're sort of sitting there already close. They're like the neuronal connections are already there. So they're bouncing back and forwards between those. It's like,
Yep.
okay, so I sit with that rhyme structure and then I go, okay, what theme am I talking on? Okay, we're talking on whatever the theme is. So the theme runs through. I'm bringing back that, and then I only have to remember the sort of examples to bring it back. So it's sort of like the more you do it, the more you get the cheating ability to do it because you've got those you've walked those pathways before, if that makes sense. So
Yeah,
like
that
you
makes a
might
lot of
hear
sense.
something that sounds like it's flow, but you're not reading the 20 poems that came before it and the the
Yeah.
years of other work to be able to get that piece out succinctly, and it seems it just as it comes. So
Yeah.
it's a bit of a yeah.
If you were to like teach this to someone else, what would be the areas that you'd focus on to sort of help them do that same thing?
How I'll teach people depends on what they're into or what they need, right? Some people will want to come and see me to get their book published. Like I said, I've done 12. Some people will want to see me to do just poetry as a form of healing. But if you're particularly curious about like the free flow, just expression, yeah. So if we'll play down that path,
Yeah, that sounds good. We'll start there and yeah,
yeah,
expand out.
yeah. Look, I would suggest I'll do a couple of things. There's multiple skill sets that we're playing with, right? Skill set of being able to free flow and free talk, and
Mm.
just sort of like get out of your own way and speak, not in rhyme, not to time, not with any sort of agenda or any sort of theme or any sort of movement or anything. It's just
Mm.
being able to just get out of your own way and speak, right? And that might just literally be talking to you and just getting you to just free flow out loud, right? And if you can't do that out loud, it would be getting a page and going, or like your phone or a laptop or whatever, however you best write, and just try to write without a the internal editor. So like a lot of people, I just a couple of days ago, 2 days ago, I wrote a 3,000 word ebook called Breakthrough Writer's Block and Create Your Own Next Masterpiece. I wrote it in 2 hours, which I should be able to write that pretty quickly given the topic. And then I published it the next day. So I wanted to sort of show how
Wow.
quickly you can publish something. But so I went through that process. I'm like, yeah, that's 2 days and it's up. But one of the main bits of advice is getting people out of their own way. You don't want to edit at the same time as you're writing. I mean,
Mm,
in the same way, if you want to speak and flow and move and grow and do this whole thing, you don't want to have the voice in your head that's screaming at you saying, shut the fuck up, you're a loser. They're going to
mm,
judge you for what you're saying right now. Right? Like
yeah.
that voice is there. And and you're also, so you don't want that voice, the critical voice. Sometimes it helps, don't get me wrong. Like it's there for a reason, but you really want to dampen that right down or kick it out.
Yep.
And then also the editor that's telling you, okay, this isn't making logical sense. He
Mm,
has to go, right, like there's all of these rules and structures and things that you've put in your own way to help you communicate, that you've learned either by the book or just by interacting with people. It's like, oh, you've got to learn to just get out of your own way. Now that some people might take to that and just flow and grow and do it and just move and groove and be able to just express,
yeah.
but other people will feel quite compressed and they'll feel quite depressed. They'll feel quite a bit of a mess and stuck, right? You see, I'm just playing with words right now. I'm doing it. Um, but it depends on the person, and it might be a matter of, a conversation. It might be a matter of doing it through writing. It might
Mm,
be a matter of uncovering and picking away those blocks. So for example, let's say you might push up against an internal barrier, a thing that's stopping you from speaking. There'll be words or things that we can do into that space to start unlocking that. That
mm,
might be, writing poetry. It might be free journaling. It might be meditation. It might just be that there's, it depends on how it's basically, it's sort of a bit of an intuitive thing of how to unlock the person.
yeah.
And then it becomes like, and that so there's another aspect to it, which is the sort of the technical side of things. So it's like, you can free flow and free speak all you like, but unless um, you need to have like actual skill at word flow.
Mm,
Like you have to know a bunch of words and how they rhyme together, and that once again comes with time and practice and tools. Um, one of my favorite sorts of rhymes. I don't really do them much anymore. Favorite sorts of poetry, sorry, is called a monorhyme, and that's when the last word of each sentence of each line rhymes, right? So so you'll have, like I said, with the express, compress, depress. And I used to write a bunch of poetry that had that style of rhyme flow. I wrote
mm,
a 6,700 word poem that is, it flow like, it's, the whole thing is a epic mono-rhyme poem. The rhyme changes throughout, but it tells a story, and so it's like it does a chunk of each different rhyme with a different rhyme, different like sort of ending rhyme, if that makes any sense.
yeah. Yeah.
Doing that gave gave me quite the grounding of working out what words rhyme together and the themes that you could rhyme about those words. So then it would be a matter of like helping the student to start playing and exploring. But obviously everyone's different. If you came to me, like, you, Adam, I'd be like, okay, let's get you just free talking for a bit,
Yeah.
right? I think you'd be fine writing because there's a delay between you and the page, and it's hard. Like no matter how fast you type, you can still edit. So I
Yeah.
would want to get you just talking and expressing without the voice and the words and the language and the rules and all of that sort of stuff. Everything that you're writing about,
Yeah.
get that all fucking gone and just get you free talking. And like it might be a matter of like the free expression games. If I say a word and you respond.
Yeah.
So, for example, what's the first word that I say when it comes to mind if I say cloud?
Rainy day.
Umbrella.
Hand.
Don't think. See, you're thinking too much, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
get it out straight away. Um, and just sort of just and like that's a silly game. Don't get me wrong, but the whole idea would be to train yourself to just go,
Mm, mm.
etc., etc. Depends on how long I've got with the person and what their goal is and all that sort of stuff.
Just a quick question in that sort of particular area. When you go through that experience of like word association, the first word that comes to mind when you say a particular word, what's sort of going on inside of your head? Are you experiencing the words themselves, or do you see pictures, or what's your experience like with that?
If I'm trying to just flow,
Mm,
It depends. Yeah, you're trying to get the get the computer to analyze itself.
Yeah, and
If
to give
I'm
like
if I'm if
a
I'm doing
vision
the
for what people
game,
are going through, looking for.
so
Yeah.
if I'm doing that game, I'm just trying to say the first thing that comes to mind.
Mm.
Like it's not about like seeing things or seeing the word or anything like that. It's literally just learning to just speak without thought. So it's like it is just it is just a quick response. But
Yeah.
that's just like a little game. I think maybe more what you mean is if you're doing a free flow form expression, if you're doing a spoken word rhyme, if you're you know flowing,
Mm.
what's going through your mind then? Is that sort of more where you're going with the question, or is it specifically
That's more where you're going
the
with it.
game?
So it's like
Yeah.
the embodied experience of what that feels, looks, and sort of sounds like internally when you're in that sort of state of mind and in that sort of flow. Sort of like like to transfer for other people that haven't really experienced that, what that is like for you to go through, and
So
so they know when they're getting there.
yeah, so it doesn't come every time, right? So if I try and force things, it doesn't always work. Yeah,
Mm.
so I'm sort of trying to learn to tap into that space. But in the same way, when I first started writing poetry, the poems didn't just come. It's a learnt skill, and it's also a matter of sort of this might sound a bit sort of energetic or woo woo. It's sort of like a matter of opening yourself up to creativity and letting it flow through.
Mm.
Um, and it's side tangent. My partner's quite religious. When she met me, I was staunch atheist. But I've moved since into um, sort of agnostic, questioning spiritualist, right?
Mm.
And once again, she's amazing because she allowed me to ask all the questions without taking insult. If you ever want to convert anyone to anything, just answer their questions and don't get insulted. That's the key. By the way, but she that's helped me to sort of that idea of just being open to this idea of the muse of creativity. Now, you might call that creative space whatever you call it, and the atheist part of me, the scientific left brain part of me is like, well, that's a function of the neurons bouncing, the neuronal connections firing in different things and semantic maps and networks, and like all of that sounds fucking great. But ultimately, like I'm not watching my brains and neurons firing off. And if it makes it easier to ascribe that process to the muse, great.
Mm.
Or there is a divine muse and inspiration that is wanting to speak through me and is desperate and fucking screaming at my face to express something. If only I open up the page and start writing or speaking right now, then also great. The answer doesn't matter. It's learning to open myself. Like it doesn't matter if like what the back end functionality. Like, I mean, you as a mechanic might know how a car works, right? I don't give a shit as long as when I do the driving thing, it does the driving thing, right? I
Yeah.
press the pedal, something happens, magic happens, and the car goes.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me how that, as long as it doesn't break, right? As long as it's safe, I don't care. Like I literally couldn't give a shit as long as it works.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of like the curious part of me wants to know, but ultimately the artist, the poet, the person that's trying to express doesn't really matter. So long-winded answer, taking it back to what you're saying, I feel something needing to be expressed, or like I'll see or I'll hear or I'll just grasp the first part of the sentence. So if we take it back to that previous poem, the the every time I swallow my medication, I must also swallow the implicit belief. Like that concept came to mind. And I'm
Mm.
like, okay, there's something here. And I've learned sort of like a metal detector, panning for goals, like beep, 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 beep. I was like, oh, there's something here. So I've learned to sort of uncover that and go down that path. And I'm like, okay, there's a flow.
Yeah.
And now with the audio, like the spoken word, it's recognizing that because sometimes things are coming up and it's coming so quickly that I can't write it. I'm like, okay, this is a spoken word thing. This is an expression. This is in
Mm.
the moment. And then it's a matter of just getting out of my own way and flowing and trusting that my mind and my mouth will do the work.
Yeah.
Um, there's a martial arts analogy here. I've been training martial arts 20 odd years. I started with Muay Thai and karate, and now I've been doing jiu-jitsu, right?
Mm.
And the longer I do it, the more my body just does the moves, right? It's like my body just knows how to fight. If someone was to tackle me from behind right now, I would twist, I would turn, and I would do some sort of move that I've done a million times in the gym, and it would just happen. And then the thinking brain would check in. Then my mind would go, oh shit, you're in a fight. Then it would go, start processing and thinking about what it needs to be doing. Once
Mm.
it gets to a place that it doesn't know what to do. So the goal of fighting, I think, is to learn it all and then forget it all. Like there's some sort of, I don't know the quote, but there's quotes about this, like, you master the way by forgetting it or something like that.
Yeah.
Because the idea is that if you're thinking you're moving too slowly, particularly if you're against a trained martial artist, they're like, you're both in this same space, and whoever's trained more typically wins because they're going through that process quicker. Their thinking brain isn't in the way. Like
Mm.
if you look up clips of animals fighting, or like one animal like killing another animal, there's no like cognitive thought process there per se. Like they're not like questioning the morality of the action. They're not thinking I'm going to move my jaws like this and do this thing. They're just embodied and doing it, right? It's just natural. And if you watch high level sports people, if you watch
Mm.
high level performers in any field, they get out, like in like artists, politicians, speakers, entrepreneurs, like anyone that's really good at, that's done the thing so many times, they're out of their own way and they're just doing it. They're not
Mm.
thinking about it. I mean, like you with walking, you don't think about walking anymore. You just walk.
Yeah.
It's not a thought. It just happens. Like I'm not, like if you had to dissect to me how, tell me the process of what's in your mind as you're walking.
Yeah.
You'd be like, that's fucking ridiculous. Like it makes no sense to, like, I mean, you could break it down, don't get me wrong. Like you could sort of like, and like it is people's jobs,
Yeah.
like what do they call, like functional I don't know, like functional therapists, I don't know, like that is their job to break down what it is like to properly work.
Yeah.
But for the most people, you're just walking. So in the
Yeah.
same way with the poetry, with the flow, with the expression, the more you do it, the more it becomes just flow.
Yeah. I think you described it pretty well over the last like couple of minutes there. So it's sort of like the two sides of the coin. One's that cutting off and getting letting go of the sort of judgment and internal like editing that's sort of going on the whole time. And the
Oh,
second side,
100%.
yeah, and the second side is that letting your body pay attention to the things it needs to pay attention to. So you sort of not worry about sort of paying attention to the thoughts. You're almost like stepping into the experience of the feeling itself and relaxing into that
I'll
feeling and letting the body sort of take over.
I'll put it back to you, right? You're
Hmm.
an immensely impeccable dresser. You keep getting people keep throwing this to you, right? Are you consciously going through the thought process, or is it starting to become embodied? Are you just sort of starting to know what works?
Getting closer to knowing what works.
Okay, so it's not, it's like you've studied it, you've thought about it, you've watched it, you've looked at people, and you've got, okay, this works, this doesn't work, and it's starting to become embodied, right?
Yeah.
It's just happening now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and eventually it'll just be like, okay, and some people, don't get me wrong, they've got natural style, but
Mm.
everyone has to work for it,
Yeah.
right? Like that's just true. So you're starting to see that process in that area.
Mm.
It's the same for everything. So it's like if you try and understand it from a place of not doing it yet, it will feel clunky or confusing.
Mm.
The way to learn how to do something is to do it. Like I'm stepping into sales. Now this is a distinct, almost polar opposite from where I am with social anxiety, right?
Yeah.
Thanks to the medication, thanks to self-work, thanks to good instruction, I'm now feeling confident, not confident, sorry. I'm feeling comfortable to start that process.
Mm.
That's something that I've not been comfortable doing. I'm like, hey world, here's like every aspect of my trauma. I'm okay doing that. But if I'm like, there's something about approaching people and saying, hey, like I've got an offering here. Do you want to learn it from me?
Mm.
There's something about that process that's scary. That's, obviously it's obvious why it's scary, right? But it's the same thing of like asking someone out. It's a scary proposition. You're putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
But I know the more I do it, the better and easier it's going to get. I'm a white belt. I keep saying to myself, I've got my partner saying to me, I'm like, every day that I feel stressed about this, that I'm freaking out, that it's not working, that I'm hating this process, tell me I'm a fucking white belt. Because I remember when I was a white belt with martial arts, it was pain, confusion, and just it was fucking terrible. But now it's a game, it's fun, it's flow. So I'm not there yet, but I know that if I do it enough, sales will become fun. It'll become a game. It'll become a flow. It'll become just embodied.
Part of you in itself. And it's like the thought that's sort of coming up with that as you're describing it is it's almost a game of learning what not to pay attention to and letting the practice of it take over.
100%. Like, I mean, the martial arts analogy is good here, and also the poetry analogy is good here, right? When you start doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you roll with someone and you are just sweating, you're gassed, you're fucked, right? It's terrible because you're exerting energy in all of the wrong places. You don't know what to do to save yourself. And you think that if you tense everything all at once, you'll survive because that's what the human instinct is. And it's wrong. You need to relax and you need to know when to apply your muscle, right? Because that way, by the end of the session, when I roll now and when people that have trained as long as me roll, we're all just calm. It's like we're not gassed, we're not tired because we haven't been exerting ourselves. Now, if we were to compete against each other, that would be a different story. Two people at my level, we're now, now it's a fight, right? So now we would get tired. But if we're to do it with people that we're far better than, it's like a cat playing with a mouse. Now, that's not talking myself up. That's just talking up the martial art itself. It's the art works. But what you learn is that you see these white belts and, they've gone to the gym or they're stronger than me and they can lift more than me, but they just don't know when to use that strength. They're toddlers trying to sprint. And the same thing with poetry. It's like you'll start writing, you'll start going off tangents. You'll have all these extra words that aren't necessary. You'll repeat yourself. You won't include things. And then the piece just comes across as clunky. And you'll look at it and you'll be like, why does this suck? Like, why isn't this resonating? What am I not doing? And you can't even see where the problems are because you haven't got the reps in.
Yeah. So where do you go from that stage there?
More reps.
More reps,
More reps.
yeah.
Just keep doing it. But I mean, what else is there with everything? What else is there? Like, I know very little about working with a car, right? What do I need to do to get better at working with a car? Have someone showing me, and me, like, you could tell me, how to change the oil in my car.
Yeah.
Might help. It won't. Like, if you could tell me right now how to change the oil in my car, I would have no fucking idea what I'm doing. But if you showed me and I'm there watching you, and then I did it again, and like I did it and you guided me when I was making a mistake.
Yeah.
And then you watched me and you just gave me a bit of critique. Right. You know what I mean? Like you could walk me through that process, and how many iterations would it take to teach someone how to change oil in a car?
Yeah.
Like, what, 2, 3 maybe, right? Like hardly any. It wouldn't take long because I know it's an easy thing to do, right?
Yeah.
But to explain it to me with words would be very, very confusing.
Yeah.
To show it, and then for you to like even better like hold my hands and like, this is how you do it, and and you're there, you're holding my fragile ego because I'm a man and I should know how to do this stuff, but I don't,
Yeah.
But the same thing with the words and the poetry. Like people struggle, they don't know what to do. It's like, here, this is just gentle steps.
In that sort of line of the ego, sort of like taking it back a few steps, and sort of going back to where you're mentioning to start free flowing with words, you're letting go of the judgment and letting go of the self-editing. What was your journey like going through that? What was some of the experiences you had with like being able to let go of that judgment? That's a difficult area.
Years of expressing myself online. Look, it's a feedback loop. If you go in the online social media space, right, the more vulnerable and open you are, the better. So I started off with words behind a page because that's easier, as in not me speaking, but me writing. It's easier to write vulnerably than it is, well, it was for me, than it was to speak, because the speaking is happening in real time. But there was a level of crafting the vulnerability, right? Like there's a level, like, and I mean, if you're writing poetry, you are crafting the words onto the page.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a stepwise fashion, So like the first book, Under the Influence, was me writing about the traumatic events, and it's not poetry. It's a tough read. Like it's well written, but it's not poetry. It's like these things happened and this is how it made me feel, right? Fine. But that opened me up. And then it's like, okay, then I started writing poetry. And the poetry that I wrote back then was a bit more raw, a bit rougher, a bit more literal. You know, like a lot of the time you see poetry and it's like very, very, very esoteric, and you show that to someone that's never read poetry, and they're like, it doesn't land. They have no idea what they're looking at, right?
Yeah.
You show that to someone that's read poetry or read it a bunch, and they're like, "Whoa, this is sublime." But it's like a fine wine, right? Like if the first wine you have is a $500 bottle of wine, you won't be able to tell the difference between that and a $12 goon bag, right? Like it tastes the same. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you've got no concept. And once again, back to the martial arts analogy,
Yeah.
you could roll with me as a beginner, or you
Hmm.
could roll with I'm a purple belt. You could roll with a black belt with double the years of experience as me, and we will probably feel exactly the same, right?
Mm.
Like I will be able to do to you the same things that that guy will be able to do to you, but that guy is good enough that he could do it to me as well, right? That's
Yeah.
how good he is. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that it's a matter of just slow stepping yourself, and like if you can jump steps, great.
Mm.
So for example, I'm recognizing the desire to jump step with sales. Yeah. So I've gone from being very passive income. I've got a bunch of books, a bunch of talks and stuff on like Insight Timer and Skillshare and like all of these sort of like things that people can go and get passive income, to wanting to do sales.
Mm.
you know, come and work with me. So I'm selling myself. I can coach you, sort of situation. And it's I recognize that I was going to feel stressed or worried or anxious or feel icky about doing it for $10 an hour or $10,000. Right? The ickiness isn't. It's dependent on money, but it's also dependent. It's not like that same feeling will have to be overcome at whatever price point I price myself at. So I
Mm.
decided, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to price myself cheap, because why go through this battle just to get a cheap victory at the end? You know what I mean? I'm not going to put myself out there for $30 an hour, because I know that I'm worth far more.
Mm.
I've got a lot of skills that are very refined and very niche. And if I look at other people, I'm like, they're charging at this price point.
Hmm.
But I'm looking at that price point going, oh, fuck me, that's a lot. But literally a tenth of that would cause me the same level of anxiety. So why don't I just avoid all of that mess and play at that higher level? Because that's where I'm going to get to anyway, because that's what I'm worth.
Mm.
But it's like so it's sort of like I'm recognizing that I can jump that gap, if that
Hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you're up against the same battle anyways. And whether it's a sort of lion or a tiger, they might both have extremely different abilities to sort of fight back, but they both feel like the same animal in a way. So it's, might
100%. It's
might as well take
well,
on the
it's
king of the
it's
jungle.
well, why not learn? Well, I think maybe the analogy is more like why not learn to fight the adult tiger rather than starting with the cubs?
Mm. Yep.
You
Yep.
know what I mean? Like if I'm going to learn how to fight tigers, like let's not fuck around. Um, Obviously you've got to like learn the skills and build yourself up and yada yada. And I'm not being ridiculous with what I'm asking for, like but we're building out. Yeah, it's like this is what I'm going to go to anyway. Let's just fuck all of that noise, because that's just the anxiety and the fear and the self-worth all showing up. It's going to show up at a tenth of what I'm asking, so it's going to show up at what I'm asking. I may as well just go straight to that.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that's pretty intense area to get into. Uh, yeah. The feelings behind that sort of sales resistance, because there's sort of two sides that seem to be coming in there. One's you're worth you're worth the value that you're putting out there, and the second side is like the questioning of should you do you deserve it in a way. Um, are they the kind of questions that are coming up inside, or is there like a deeper level that's sort of going on?
I I like the idea of detachment, right? So it's like, let's say I've got an issue with my child acting up.
Mm.
If I saw that child acting up to a different parent, I would be able to offer advice far more objectively.
Mm.
Um, this is something that happened. My son's struggling with neuroticism, like he's a bit neurotic, right? Like me. And I've worked as a disability support worker, been in the house, and I'm like, okay, if I saw, a kid acting this way, what would I do? And then that question allowed me to go, oh, okay, as a parent, I've got too many task demands on my child. I'm asking too much of him at night. I should be doing more of it. And then it's like, well, that's pushing up against a value that I have of I want my kid to do as much for himself as he can, right? Because it's like that's teaching him how to live in life. He should be putting his clothes away. He should be making his lunch, etc., etc., etc. But that value was far, far, far inflated. So stepping back, I could see that that was happening. So now I've stepped back and gone, okay, well, I'm going to hold to that value, but that might mean that he's just there watching the process rather than doing it all himself. Takes away a lot of the stress. Now he's better functioning. Far calmer. Reason I'm saying that is it's like I'm trying to detach and see myself from the outside perspective. What's the problem here? What am I worth? So if I came across someone else, so like back to that, the start of the conversation where I gave you the feedback that I got, the positive feedback, I've explained love in a way that has never, perfectly pinpointed it. Yeah, amazing, whatever, right? I am somebody's favorite poet, somebody's favorite author, quite a few people now, right? That's who I am to them. It doesn't feel like that in me. I'm just me. But to them, I am that person, right? So then it's like, okay, if I, all the books behind me, right? I've got more on my shelf over here. If I could speak to or be coached by one of those authors, how much would I pay?
That's a good point.
Pay a fucking lot more. I'd pay a lot more than what I'm asking for, right?
Yeah.
A lot more. Because to those people, I am that person. Yeah. But to me, I'm just me. To me, there's this idea. I wrote it in the book that is like my best-selling book, How to Get Your Shit Together. It's the self-help book that I needed to write for myself. I'll go into that a bit after. You probably appreciate it. But you only see the world from the inside, right? But you only see a highlight reel of the outside. So I only see you now. You've done your hair, you're looking schmick, you're well presented. I'm not hearing the inner critic. I'm not seeing the lead up. I'm not witnessing the breakdown that will happen later because you're overwhelmed. I'm just making stuff up, but I'm not getting any of that. All I'm getting is you in this moment, right? But from the inside of me, I'm feeling all of that stuff simultaneously. It's that internal editor is screaming at me right now. I should have got a better camera for this because my camera sucks. Look at his camera. Should have done my hair. I can just check into that space. I've learned to like push that aside, but that's still there. The point is I'm seeing the highlight reel of you, but I'm seeing everything of me, and I'm trying to compare those two things. It's not a fair comparison.
Yeah, wow.
So if we bring it back to the sales thing, it's like all of that shit's going on in my mind, but in the other person's mind, they're talking to Zach Phillips, the poet that they love. That's it.
That was
full stop.
Holy shit. Yeah. No, that was a bloody perfect way to describe that. You're seeing the highlight reel in the other person, but noticing everything that's sort of wrong inside of you. And when you sort of flip the script, when you go into a sales situation, they're seeing the highlight reel of you, so they don't see any of the stuff that goes on inside. That's yeah, that's such a brilliant way to describe that.
Ultimately, right, no matter what happens, you have to be your best therapist. Now, what I gave you then is like a zip file that you can open up at any time, right? So the next time you've got self-doubt or you're worried or whatever, you open up that zip file and go, I'm seeing the highlight reel, but I'm experiencing everything right now of me, right? They're only seeing my highlight reel. You can unpack it however you like, but what I want to do is, or what I found helps me, and this is back to the How to Get Shit Together book. I've read a bunch of self-help books. Like I said, I'm just prolifically reading. I wrote a book of how to get your shit together, i.e. advice to myself, full of these bits of advice. The idea being is that I'm like, oh, that's a nugget of wisdom. Do you know what I mean? That's a nugget of wisdom that hits hard. Another one, like when you've got a good therapist, when they give you these nuggets of wisdom. For example, another one that helped me was there's blank spots in my memory, things that I don't remember, right?
Mm.
Now, a lot of people that have had trauma feel that way, and you tend to fill it with the worst. It's like, okay, well, that blank memory is filled with insert X, and X is fucking traumatic, right? Like think of the worst trauma you could go through, but it's an empty space in your mind. So the answer to that is if you can choose to fill it with something, why not fill it with something not the worst? If you can choose, and
Yeah.
if you can't choose, why not believe that the fact that you don't know suggests that it might be not the worst? Do you know what I mean? Because it really hurts to go, I've got a blank spot, extreme trauma. It's a little bit easier to swallow. I've got a blank spot, could be anything.
Mm.
And you can sit. That allows you to sit with that, the phenomena of having a blank memory spot. Do you know
Mm.
what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. So like looking back through your sort of history, through your background, you sort of get to those sort of areas where you're like, well, that's could either choose to try and fill in all the pain, suffering, and like anxiety, everything else going on in that moment, or just leave that as it is and be able to enjoy the moments that were good and sort of leave the rest.
If you can,
Mm.
because saying to try and leave anxiety is quite hard because it's just sort of a resting state. It's
Yeah.
more like anxiety is interesting because it's like a resting tension, whereas what people confuse with anxiety is like intrusive thoughts. So like thoughts that like come at you that are like sort of verbalized, like you can say them out loud.
Mm.
Like that is like anxiety does have that. But to me, anxiety feels like this, right? And I'm just tensing, for the audio listeners there, I'm tensing my body, right? I'm free, like I feel like like a meerkat looking around. Like that to me is the embodiment of anxiety. And
Mm.
then you get intrusive thoughts over the top of that of like these people are judging you. What if you don't fit in? Da, 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 da. So it's like multiple things all happening at once. Some of
Mm.
it you can address. You can address it all with different strategies. You address the meerkat through calm, slow breathing. You address the intrusive thoughts through therapy, through writing. And if you need, you address it through meditation. Like there's a whole variety of ways that you can address those things, but
Mm.
the different symptoms get addressed differently.
Bit of an odd question, but what do you feel like it'd be like to try and dig into those sort of blank areas? In terms of like the embodied experience for you?
Horrifying.
Mm.
Effectively. I'm laughing because it's like, like the gallows humor. They're blank for a reason,
Mm.
right? Something bad did happen. And like I have an absolute desire to know. Like I just want to fucking know.
Yeah.
So like I've brought this to the psychologist, but they don't like they sort of said to me because I've brought it to a few different ones, and everyone was like, yeah, like we can go there, but wouldn't it be good just to get functional now? Do you know what I mean? Like what's the actual goal? Do you want to know or do you want to be functional?
Mm.
And I'm like, well, I want to be functional. I want to, like if you can learn to accept the black hole, that's better. Like acceptance of your current reality is the best thing that you can have.
Yeah.
That's
That's a
peace.
fair point. Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel like those two are like intertwined at all in terms of
Which two, so
the sort of that black hole area of that's not directly, it doesn't seem like it's directly linked, but sort of going back through that sort of memory into sort of black hole area and almost sort of finding peace in that, even though it's an extremely horrific and painful sort of area to go into. Do you feel like that's entwined into finding peace in this current moment?
I'm not really curious to go into it anymore. I used to be.
Mm.
And I've written on it a lot. That 6.7 thousand word poem is called Can't Quite Express.
Mm.
And it is like, it is the expression of what I can't quite express. Going in and out, like the to take the poetic visual analogy, it's like there's this black hole that you can circle around, that you can sort of half peer into, but you can't quite because it sucks everything in. But then you sort of get little glimpses of little shimmers. But then also the impact of neglect feels like that. It's an emptiness. So it's like there's this dual sort of process. And it's like I want to know, but I don't want to know, but I want to explore because I want to heal and I want to grow.
Mm.
going down into this place, but it's dangerous as well because if you open yourself up too much, you risk, losing functionality.
Right.
That's something I value. But then it's a matter of doing it with the supports in place. So I don't know. It's a bit here and there. Like right now, I'm wanting to explore positivity and creativity. Like I've sort of said to my muse, so to speak, I'm like, let's do some positive poetry. Let's write a book of like proper love poems.
Yeah,
And it
right.
comes back at me, it's like, nah, it's like you're not done yet, son. Like we've got some power to go. And then it's like the best I can do you is erotic poetry. Enjoy. And then I've written hundreds of erotic poetry, and to be honest, it's a down a different tangent, but talk about a niche that I'm fucking nailing, pun intended. It's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah.
So the muse is like, yeah, you can write on that, but then the dissecting part of my mind is it's like, oh, you've been traumatized. This is a way to express the sexual trauma. So I'm like,
Gotcha.
fuck
Yeah.
me. So I don't know, but once again, it doesn't really matter. It's a matter of just, it's a matter of like, and the artist in me sort of doesn't care, like, because I want
Mm,
to produce art that moves you. Ultimately, wherever it came from, whatever the cause, whatever the impact of doing it. Like this is the artist's dilemma: is I will sacrifice to produce the art,
mm. Wow.
and how many. Oh, would you risk needing to take tomorrow off to write a poem today?
Mm, mm,
Can you afford to? Can you afford to? Do you value it enough? Now,
mm.
for me, the answer is always yes. I've learnt that my muse, if we go down the once again the erotic analogy, she's a harsh dominatrix. She fucking gets what she wants, right? And it's like this poem's coming, and I'm actually sort of starting to learn to stay back and like, hey, I can't right now. Like, I need a bit of space, but this is like a relationship with this creative part of me. It's like going like, I want to open myself up as much as possible. And then, this space is like, all right, here you go, and just shoving poems and creativity through. And now it's like, okay, let's like, I need to like go to sleep now. Like, I need like life exists. But yeah, it's it's
Brilliant.
it's it's a good space to be. But if you're wondering why the art isn't flowing, it might be because you don't value it enough.
Mm, far out. It's going to be a bit of a odd question. I don't know if it really has an answer to it, but have you ever experienced a way to change the value to your art?
What do you mean change the value?
So you described like it's if it's ever not flowing, you're not valuing the art enough.
Oh, how do you value doing art more?
Mm, mm,
Well, I mean, like it's how do you it's what do you value at all, right? You value where you put your time.
mm,
I pretty much don't watch TV. The only shows that I watch as a form of like artistic consumption, not because everyone's watching it, right?
mm,
So for example, the Netflix series Arcane, I watched because it's visually, auditorially, storyly, like it is fucking art. Every frame is perfect. Watch it, right? I've watched it 3 times,
nice. Yeah.
but I've not watched the last 10, popular series that have come out that everyone's talking about online. I couldn't give a shit. I don't
Mm,
value that. I don't care for it.
yeah.
Now, obviously, I'm going to miss artistry, and there'll be people who I trust that are like, oh, you'll resonate with this. I'm like, cool, I'll watch it. Um, but it's a value of time, right? What time do you where do you put your time? So
I
that's
thought,
one aspect. But
yeah.
that's sorry, that's still the problem with that is that I've chosen where I put my time because I do value art, right? So I'm sort of talking about it backwards, yeah.
Mm,
Whereas if you're you, Adam, right now, who goes, oh fuck, it would be cool to be an artist, right?
yeah.
What is stopping you from writing? Like let's play it right. Let's play it live, right? What's stopping you from writing?
Mm. The first thing that comes to mind is the I'd say the blocks and finding a teacher to sort of guide through the process.
I am a teacher. um, we can chat about that, obviously, but
Mm.
okay, finding a teacher. What other blocks? But because I know the reason I say finding a teacher, I'm pushing
yeah.
back on that is there's teachers everywhere,
Mm.
right? Now, so why haven't you found a teacher yet?
The purpose and goal of writing, probably the biggest one.
What do you mean?
So to write for the sake of writing, my mind sort of goes straight to, okay, there's got all these other things, and it sort of puts those as more important. Yeah.
Okay, so you exercise, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Do you exercise to get good at exercising?
No.
No,
Well,
you're not
partially,
exercising
yeah.
so you can lift. Well, you're not exercising so you can be good at exercising, right? Like that's not like the only like you're exercising for aesthetics, for strength, for fitness, for health,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Like you're not a power lifter, right? Like you're not like maybe you are. I don't know.
Mm.
Like but like you know what I mean? Like you're not exercising to exercise better per se. You're exercising for a multitude of reasons. And it might be to one of those might be to exercise better, but you're doing it for all of those reasons, yeah.
Mm.
So in terms of writing, yeah, or like, poetry, expression, free flow, this sort of stuff,
Yep.
you're not doing it for the sake of doing it. It's like for me, the area I struggle in this is relaxation, right? I struggle to relax. I struggle to switch
Mm.
off. The muse is screaming at me, whipping me, right? I feel like I should always be consuming or producing.
Yep.
So I've had lots of discussions with various people who are very good at relaxing, and they're like, you're not like okay, like yeah, you struggle to relax because it doesn't feel productive. But
Mm.
if I burn myself out, then I'm not productive at all, right?
Mm.
So I'm relaxing, not to relax. I'm relaxing because that will help me to produce. That will help me to create. It will help me to consume the information better.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's a mental reframe. Are you going to learn to do poetry, writing, freeform expression for its own sake? Maybe. Maybe that's like, depending on how you go long term, there's some sort of future there.
Mm.
Or more likely, are you learning how to talk more freely? Are you learning how to express yourself more clearly? Are you learning how to, with your words, with your actions, with your speech, move people, take them from one place to another place emotionally?
Mm. That's a fair point there.
That's why you should learn.
Mm. So how much does it cost? where where sort of some of these questions are coming from is from the conversational space. Someone that's sort of getting good at social skills, wanting to gain friends and just become a good conversationalist in general. I feel like there's a big block in that area where to find good teachers in conversation, find good teachers in how to befriend people, it becomes a little bit sort of vague of who to connect with and what to talk about. And then to learn it in field and just sort of go and practice it, it sort of gets to a stage where you feel like you're just doing the same thing over and over again, not sure what sort of where the sort of sticking points are and what to work on, or how to sort of get better from there. So bring it back to
Well,
the
this is with sorry, it's like with trust of the teacher and
mm,
trust in yourself, right? I learned martial arts from a certain instructor, John Donahue. He is a ex ADCC heavyweight champion holder. Like that's like the best in the sport.
mm,
Like that's like Olympic gold level, right? And it's ridiculous, and he's so good that it becomes like you just get used to like this amazing person. And I go, I've done some trials and played around with other instructors, and I'm like, oh, holy shit! Like I've really got it good. The point is I'm not going to learn from people I don't trust. I
yeah,
trust him to be like in this area, in where I live, Melbourne, Victoria. He is the best coach,
mm,
right? If I was living in another place, I would find you find what you can. Obviously, if you're online and depending on the sport, you can, or the instruction, you can do it digitally, of course. But it's about trust. Like I trust him to know infinitely more than I will ever know about the things that he knows about. Now, I'm not going to him for spiritual advice. That'd
Yeah.
be fucking stupid, right? And a lot of people do, like, they're going off tangent a little bit, but like they put their martial arts instructor up on this pedestal, and it's like, teach me the ways of being ethical. They don't know shit. They're just a guy that can choke you real good, right? So it's a matter of going to the coaches, trusting, and you have to feel that trust in yourself. And it could be that you need someone with heaps of university credentials. I don't think so. It could be that you need someone that you resonate with, that is doing something that you want to be doing, right? Like that's who I'm like that's who I am going to be like getting coaching from myself. The books that I read, the people that I spend my time and importantly, money, but importantly time with, are the people that will elevate me. It's like, are you familiar with Jocko Willink?
Yeah.
The ex-Navy. Okay, so I recognized in my life I didn't have discipline, right? Self-discipline. I didn't know how to prioritize. It's like I didn't have that father figure in my life. So I probably listened to maybe the first 150 episodes of his podcast. So it's 150 episodes times 3-ish hours. What's that? 450 hours of embedding Jocko Willink into my fucking brain. And now it's in there, right?
Unreal.
So
Yeah.
So then it's like, okay, well, I want to have, there's other people that bring other sort of thought processes that I value. So for example, Dan Carlin has a podcast called Hardcore History, and he has a way of thinking that talks about things in a very detached, nuanced, but he also goes real deep. He thinks in a unique way. So I'm like, fuck, I'm going to absorb him, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because I trust these people. So for you, it might be a matter of finding people that you trust and also knowing that you don't have to stick with any one person forever, right? If you and me were to work together, I would say explicitly to you, like, use this service until it's no longer useful to you. And, tell me how you're feeling, be open and honest. And either that will allow me to go down a different path or allow me to suggest other resources for you to take, right? Because you might be like, okay, well, like once again, the martial arts analogy, you've done enough groundwork. It's time to start striking. Like it's you're still learning if the overall goal is how to fight.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm sort of saying?
Yeah, I got you there. So on your sort of path, your journey, who was that person that allowed you to, or that sort of like guided you through poetry and sort of expressing yourself a lot more? Do you find that mostly with yourself, or was it with your muse or someone else?
My wife opened the door and I sprinted through, and now I'm pulling her through the doors that I've opened. Honestly, and this sounds very condescending, there is very few poets that I resonate with. I don't read much poetry because I don't like it. Like there are some, like I said, my wife, I resonate with her poetry. There's a few poets that I, like quote unquote famous poets that I've never interacted with, and a few poets in real life that I've interacted with. But the vast majority of poetry, I think the person, like, good on them for doing it by all means. Like, don't let any of this, like, once again, you put your poetry out there, you get critiqued, right? This is the critique part of me. I much more enjoy writing it than reading it. And I will read poetry, but it has to be like well vetted before I even give you a chance, unless I'm working with you. And if I am working with you, it's a matter of just uncovering those blocks, because I can take you to, the high, like I can help skip all of the bullshit that you sort of picked up along the way. Or alternatively, I can show you the endless books and resources that I've read on the topic, because that's really what you're paying for with coaching, right? You're paying for the condensed, synthesized, and expressed source.
Yeah.
Because I've, once again, read a bunch of books on poetry and creative writing and fiction and expression, because it's like, I want to know this shit. Are you familiar with the author Brandon Sanderson? He wrote.
Heard of the name? Not too familiar with it, no.
Probably like the best fantasy author, modern era fantasy, best selling at least. He had a podcast that he was, once again, 10 seasons long. Well, it's been more, but he left the podcast and other people are doing it. But when he was on there, 10 seasons long, listen to it all. I wanted that shit in my brain, right? Because it's like, okay, he's clearly doing something right. Absorb it. But then it's like, once again, if you think I'm doing something right, absorb it. Take the gift, take the offering.
Brilliant. So that sort of core like drive, that ambition, like to get into this, where do you feel that sort of built up from? Because you mentioned like as soon as she your muse sort of opened the door to it, you sort of bolted straight through it, and you're starting to sort of pull her along the way. So
pull my partner along the way. She showed me the opening and I ran with it. Yeah.
And it sounds like there's a lot of like build up of pressure, waiting for that opportunity, waiting for something like that to come up, and then as soon as that opening hit, you're away and running.
Honestly, it surprised me. I wasn't expecting this at all. Like I said, I was very left brain, analytical, atheistic. Don't know if that's a word. But I was very like down that path, and this sort of surprised me. But what really, the reason really is that it is therapeutic. It is healing. It is clarifying of thought, right? Like doing this helps me to clarify my thought, to see what's going on and to express it and play with it, manipulate it. And like, once again, I've got heaps of different techniques to go down that path, but that's not the point, is that it helps. It feels good. It's like doing a push-up. Like if you do a push-up, you get a bit of a pump. Like, yeah, like this feels good, right? It sucks to start off with. When you first start, like I'm like, why the fuck am I doing this? But it only takes you like a little bit before you know, a few months before you find yourself like craving that exercise. It's like, now I'm just like, I have to write. It has to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like there's just sort of bringing back to the social analogy or sort of area again. I feel like there's a sort of strong link there where once you find that sort of feeling inside where it creates that release, that sort of feeling of therapy, that healing, just in a little bit of a way. As soon as you find that sort of link to it, that sort of seems to be the starting point that like kicks you off in that direction. And then it doesn't really matter too much about the teacher that you find. You'll seek out the right teachers, seek out the right sort of people, and the right sort of ways to think through the experiences to sort of keep getting better and better. But until you sort of get to that sort of that link that creates that starting healing, it sort of stays stagnant almost. Does that sound?
The teacher will come. The teacher will come when the student is ready.
Yeah.
Right. I've got endless quotes that I can't attribute. Like this is a weakness of mine, right? Because I'm constantly consuming stuff. I call it just the source. It's like an inner joke with my partner. She's like, where'd you get that from? I'm like, I don't know. The source said it. Because it's like I've heard that quote somewhere, and it's like it's appropriate. Let's just shove it in here. But like you're right. Like you have to be ready for the lesson to come. You know, once again, there's endless. Like if you have shown me Jocko Willink before I was exposed to him, before, you know, at a different time, it wouldn't have resonated. I'd have been like, what the fuck, this guy's an absolute, you know, tosser, you know, like, you know, douchebag. You know, you could easily say that he's like there's a whole bunch of like derivatives that you could say about him. Same exact person, right? You know, and I'm aware that like people will consume me in a similar format. If they read something or they connect or resonate with me, maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe it takes a year, maybe it takes 3 years, maybe, you know, they come back to it after time or whatever. But eventually, well, maybe not eventually, but you know, they will resonate when it resonates.
Yeah,
and it's an interesting space. The real interesting space is when you get a body of work and you reread your old stuff. Like then it becomes real trippy because you've got this. The more you like, this is actually really like sort of like you might appreciate this from the internal interesting perspective, right?
Yeah.
If you can get out of your own way and write with pure vulnerability in the moment right now, you're giving yourself a time capsule for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years later. Right? That's like that's something that you can like look back upon and go, oh shit, this is who I was then.
Yeah.
And then you can speak to that same space, that same resonance from a new perspective with your new knowledge. It gets real trippy and real fun.
Yeah. Some memories come back to mind of finding text messages and letters from sort of high school of like sending to sort of ex-girlfriends and whatnot. And reading back through it, just
what is it? Facebook memory from 7 years ago. Oh. that shit's cringe. I can't handle that shit.
It hurt. It's one of those memories that you, like you mentioned about before, it's like the gap in the memory that you want to just get rid of. Yeah.
Look, dissociation is an adaptive response to for a reason.
It's brilliant. Cool. Just looking at for the time, did you want to start wrapping up pretty soon? And sort of.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that's sort of coming up for you at the moment? Do you want to sort of go through?
Not really. Look, go a little bit longer. Ask if you've got questions on your mind. Like I'm thinking your questions are pulling out some fun discussions. Yeah. Do you have it? Feel free. Go deep. Go wild. Go wacky. Like what's on your mind that feels socially inappropriate to ask that you want to ask? Like go there. Just do it.
Oh, brilliant.
Free speak.
Free speech. The biggest one that's coming to mind at the moment. What's the biggest challenges that you're experiencing right now? What's the emotional and intense feeling obstacles that you're up against?
Oh. So starting the medication has been quite a big journey because it felt like a failure for a lot of the time. But spoken on that, I was working with someone for 5 years, and due to reasons outside of my control, funding issues and a bunch of other stuff, that job basically overnight disappeared. And this was like keeping my family and I, like that's what we had 2 children during this time I was working this job, and it just literally disappeared very quickly. And that's scary financially. Obviously, doing coaching and stuff now, so that's good. So it's not necessarily the financial issue that's scary. It's the feel like the grieving process. Part of my mind wants to do what it always has done when something has happened and dissociate and lie to myself and say I don't care and push down those feelings and just hold it back. And I can feel myself doing that, like, nope, too painful, not feeling it. I don't care. This is all good. I've got this, right? But then the other part, the more mature part, the more what would you say? The more wiser, for lack of a better expression, experienced is recognizing this and going, this is painful, dude. Like, yeah, like it is just a job after all, but I was there for 5 years. I knew these people. I was literally in their home. It was disability support work, and it was like friendships and stuff. So it's like it's a grieving process. It's hurtful, it's painful, and it's something that I haven't experienced before, and I don't have a map or a road work or a like a guidebook of how to go through it. Like I need to sort of, like, it is sort of a grieving process. It's a, like there'll be things like in jokes or things that I would have sent or messaged to these people with, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's gone. Now it's not like they've died, but like the relationship's basically been ended. And it's like, okay, that's gone now. That's, it is sort of like a mini death, so to speak. And that's that's a new space for me to process that. But on the positive side, that time and that mental space has given me a lot of freedom to pursue this coaching, to pursue, like I said, I wrote a book in a day and published it the next day. Like, it's giving me the mental clarity and freedom to really go balls to the walls on my creativity. So that's interesting, but it is still, sort of, the waves of grief wash over you, so to speak. And it's a bit rough.
That the side of, like, right at the start there, we mentioned the escapism and sort of trying to get away from it. Do you find that sort of plays out in a lot of areas of your life?
It has done. Once again, like, the writing has helped. Like, I keep going back to this, but it's like my default response, a trauma response, if you pull it back, once again, looked into this as well. Someone gets traumatized, they may dissociate. And that basically, it's sort of like you're pretending like things don't exist. It's like, in the face of trauma, it's better to not exist than it is to exist and feel, right? And everyone experiences a bit of this. If you're in a car crash or something crazy happens, you forget, right? But with complex trauma, you are doing that prolonged and over time, and it sort of becomes a learnt response. And like, it's quite multifaceted, and I can only speak from my internal perspective, so take it as a grain of salt. I'm not a psychologist. I've studied psychology, but I'm not a psychologist, right? But it's so my default, it's not a choice. It's like something like, let's say I was in a social situation. How I was telling you, like, I'm observing people, and like the person tries to speak up and they don't get noticed, right? If that person happens to be me, because it happens to everyone sometimes, right? My default is to not feel that rejection. My default is to block that out. My default is to not pretend like it doesn't exist, because that sounds like it's a choice. but it's like I'm just watching a TV show. It's hard to explain
Right.
dissociation or derealization, because it's like it's trying to describe like it from the internal perspective. It's a bit odd, but it's like it's a coping mechanism. But I'm learning to, like I said, with this work situation and with other stuff, I'm learning to feel, and that involves expression. That involves like crying. Like I never used to cry, but I'm like going, okay, I'm opening up. I'm able to cry now, and that's, it's not easy, but it's a process, and ultimately feeling now is better ongoing. It's more healthy.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's sort of it sounds like you're sort of allowing yourself to process and also recognize those moments a bit more. So when you're in those sort of situations where in that sort of group chat you go to say something and no one hears you, you sort of aware of yourself and going, okay, no one heard me. Fuck that. It did feel a bit shit, but I'm going to sort of get back into it. But you sort of let that sort of sit there rather than disappear.
Well, not even necessarily, not get back into it as in like get back into the conversation. It's like feel that pain, feel that rejection. Like I was rejected then. Well, and then it's like, no, I wasn't really rejected. Maybe I just misinterpreted the situation and my comment wasn't sort of going down the flow of the conversation. Or maybe, like there's a whole bunch of different ways to interpret that social situation, right? Maybe I wasn't heard. Maybe I misinterpreted the situation. Maybe the flow of the like there's endless different ways to interpret it, but that's all words. There's a feeling that I'm feeling in response to that thing happening. All those words are popping up. That's not what I'm going for right now. I'm going for like, let's just feel that feeling, whatever that is, that confusion, that mess, that cloud of emotionality feels like something in my heart right now, right? It feels like rejection.
Yeah.
Feel it. Feel it a bit, right? Don't dwell on it. Don't like lose, like, and just like curl up in a ball and like over the top, do it, because that's not warranted in that situation. It's like an extreme response. Like I'm not saying to like or fall into a wallowing pit of despair. But if my partner died or my kids died, that would be the appropriate response, right? And it would be good to be able to feel that. Like when my father died, I didn't feel anything.
Really?
Now, well, I did, but I didn't. I pushed it down. I'm like, fuck, like I'm not, like I just didn't feel anything. When I had exams in uni, it's like, oh, I'm not nervous. I was fucking terrified, but I was not feeling it, right? So it's not real. And like I was operating from a place of unreality, just fear of getting it wrong, fear of being hurt. Now it's like it's all a function of, once again, shitty childhood. But the problem is you learn to adapt to the really bad stuff, but then it flows into all aspects of your life. Right. Like it's healthy to dissociate when there is real trauma. It's not healthy to dissociate when you're slightly rejected at a party. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's not a healthy response anymore. But you follow your learned behavior.
Yeah. Two like extreme ends of the scale there, where what in that sort of first area where your father passed away, and the second area where it's that anxiety coming up for the test, where you're sort of disconnected from both. Knowing from your position now, what would you say to you back then? What kind of conversation would you have with you back then to help you through it more?
Like past me. What would I say to past me?
Yeah.
The answer that came to me would be I would show him some of my best poetry and say, like, this is in you. You can like this is like if you were to just take a breath, feel and express, like this art is gonna fucking flow. And it will be better than anything you've ever known, anything that your fucking dumb fuck father ever made. Like this is inside you.
Yeah.
If only you allow yourself to feel.
And there's a bit of an odd, more odd question, but if you were to put yourself back into the state of you back then and hearing those words, how would that make you feel? What would that sort of be like going through that, experiencing those words?
The atheistic part of me would be very much questioning the logic of the time travel device that got me there.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, it's hard to play that game because it's like, I would need to know to exactly the setup of the situation, but like
Mm.
how would I respond to that? If look,
Say on the
assuming
lighter.
let's say I believed it to be true. You know what I mean? Like, because there's, like someone comes like I'm playing down the sci-fi short story path. It's like, yeah, bullshit, fuck off. But if I believed it was me and I
Mm,
believed it would be possible that what this person is telling me is true,
mm.
I wouldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't I wouldn't trust myself. Like I have like trust issues, right? It takes me a while to trust.
Yeah.
Once again, finding a mentor, finding a teacher, finding a coach, finding a guide. So it would take me quite a number of interactions of interacting with myself to know that I wouldn't fuck myself over. And then once I believed myself, then
Yeah.
it would be a matter of like saying, do I want to go? Do I want to become this person?
Mm,
Or more specifically, do I want to take the wisdom of this person to become more than this person? Because if that person is truly me and I learn from me, then I could become better than who I am. Right? Like
yeah.
if I
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
give me all of the lessons condensed, oof, that's this. Now we're talking like meta poetry, right? Like that shit's wild.
Oh, that's brilliant. I think the sort of question that's coming up is, and so like, yeah, looking for in a roundabout way is going back to that experience and the embodiment of where you were back then. What would it have taken to have to believe that new pathway, to believe that sort of different way of thinking about the world, the way that you think about the world now?
Proof,
Proof.
proof, proof, embodied proof,
Mm,
right? So for example, like if you wanted to, I'd be happy to talk about coaching with you, right? And
mm,
the reason I would suggest that to you would be having spoken with me in this conversation and previous conversations, you've got a pretty good idea of what I'm about and what I've offered. And you've also felt what it's like to be in my presence and to talk with me, right?
yeah.
You've got an embodied experience of that. There's the evidence. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like there's the sales pitch. Do you want this? Then it's just a matter of negotiating, like discussing the price and the arrangement, right? That's it, right?
Mm-hmm.
so so in terms of like my self belief, it's like I would have to embody it and feel it to know if I wanted to. Do you know what I mean? I have to have that proof. So
Mm,
for example, it took me years to try calm breathing, right?
mm,
Because it was such a cliched piece of advice that I'm like, oh, go fuck yourself, take a calm breath, right? Because no one that I trusted had suggested it to me.
mm,
Yeah. And it's like, if you just like, like it's calming, it works, right? There's a whole field of meditation that's called breath work for a reason, right? Like
mm,
I've looked into the science now of like the biology of like the mind body connection. Like it's right there. But the moment I finally got out of my own way and tried calm breathing, I'm like, oh fuck me, I've been holding my breath for 20 years. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So it's like if I was to go back and speak to my past self, I would be my own worst client because I'm, like fucking, like I'm pick the points in my own problems. But I'll do my best to deliver a experiential feeling that moved my past self.
Mm,
Like, here's some awesome poetry that you will write. Let's get you opening up and expressing. And most importantly, for my past self, a compassionate, guided, loving hug/hand. Like, I've got you through this, buddy. You're safe.
mm,
Because that
mm,
really is at the core of all of the rejections. It's like you need to feel safe with the person that you're working with. Like, once again, in terms of jujitsu with my coach, I feel safe working jujitsu with him.
mm.
Right? If it was advice, relationship advice, not so much, right? That's not his expertise. I'm not going to him for that sort of advice. Right. Same thing. Like I'll go to my therapist for psychology advice because that's her area of expertise. We've built it up over time. You know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah, absolutely.
I think
Yeah.
I think I've answered that question. It was a bit.
There's a lot of
Again, there.
interesting stuff in there though. Yeah, it's something that can be looked at from a lot of different areas, but that to try and like recap on it, it's you'd need to meet someone that you fully trusted and you see it as someone that you want to become, that has the skills, has the experience, has the life that you want to build into, and that's willing to walk your journey with you.
Partially correct. I don't want to become Jocko Willink, right?
Mm-hmm.
But are you familiar with like D&D, like putting in attributes, or like a role playing game where you go like charisma, strength, agility? You know, you're putting in points.
Yeah.
Do you just sort of know that analogy, right?
Yeah, like
So I'm like
Dragons.
Jocko. Yeah, Dungeons and Dragons. Jocko's got discipline points, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm checking into my bar and going, fuck me, I've got low discipline points. I
Mm-hmm.
need to put some of those points in my game, right?
That's cool.
Jump, consume. Now, obviously, like there's two things to what you said. There's like, you know, the person that's willing to walk with you. That's obviously vital. But in terms of who and what they're offering, it's like I'm looking inside. It's like I don't want to be Jocko, but I wanted to be me that was a bit like, you know, with discipline points, right?
Yeah.
You know, with, you know, whoever you've got in there. It's like I want, you know, jujitsu. I get my coach jujitsu points in there. That's why I'm going to see him. Oh, you know, like whatever. Yeah, you sort of get the analogy there. You get yeah, but then you also do want the person to want to go on that journey with you. You want to, you know, and if it is a person online, for example, like Jocko Willink, his content is out there, right? There's such a body of work, and for me, it's like I don't need him to talk to me directly. It's like I don't need him looking at my life and saying, "Hey, Zach, you should do this." It's like I felt like I could just embody, because he's an interesting storyteller. He's a poet, by the way, right? He's a writer. Like it's a weird dichotomy, but like just like sort of absorbing that was good. Whereas other people, it's like, no, I want to physically be in your presence because it's an embodied feeling that pulls it out of me. Do you know what I mean? It's like it comes from the interaction. So it depends on the what points I want and how those points are best added to the character sheet that is my life.
Yeah, good point. Good point. It's just saying that's like the area where if you were to meet Jocko Willink,
yeah,
that conversational side that would pull something different out of you. What do you feel like difference in just hearing his content to actually have a conversation with him after you've heard all his content? How would that change you? What would that sort of mean to you?
I'm going to go down a slightly different tangent because this is happening to me on the opposite side, right? So I've got hours of content out. I've got 10 plus books. I've got a variety of like you, if you were to go through my social media channel, you would very much know me, right? I'm very open and honest and vulnerable. But this weird thing happens that would happen with me to Jocko, right? Is that it's an unbalanced relationship. People know me and they message me with this deep, dark, open, like, here's my fucking trauma, right? And it's okay. Like I'm not against that. I'm aware that that will happen. Or they're so open and explicit and over the top instantly, because it took me a while to realize this. I'm like, oh shit, they've got what feels like a relationship with me because they know me so well. But what they're not realizing is that they haven't come to the part, like I haven't resonated with them before they start expressing. Right. So for me to meet Jocko, right, I'm aware, because that's happened to me. Like until I was in this space, I didn't know that was even a thing, right? So this is sort of like only having an audience, much smaller audience than him, obviously, but having an audience where people are doing this to me, I'm like, okay, fuck. Like I don't even know how I would engage in a conversation with him, because it's like I wouldn't want to be like, oh, hey, remember in that episode? Like that feels very like suck uppy, right? But then it's like I would probably look to him to lead the conversation and just absorb more than. Do you know what I mean? Because I feel like what I would wait for him to ask for information about me before I gave it, because I'd be aware that I'm like holding, 3,000 relationship chips, 450 plus hours. I've read, all of his books. It's like, fuck, I know so much about you. You know fucking nothing about me. There's a social, like I've got you on a pedestal in my mind, so the only probably what I would want to do is roll, do a jiu-jitsu match with him, like train with him, do like a free training session with him, because that would be like, I've never done that with him. I know he's a black belt. I know that he'll fucking smash me, but like it's a different context. You know, I don't have any like it's a more neutral ground. You know what I mean? There's no pre-build up of any sort of relationship there. It's just like let's roll. And then from there, hopefully a conversation would develop. So if anyone's listening and they want to roll with me, come down and we can train.
It's bloody awesome. Yeah. Like I suppose like to we'll look at wrapping up pretty soon, but to bring it towards a more of a conclusion, if you were to sell me into the your course, your experience, and what you offer, would you like to sort of play out a bit of that role and also to have a sales conversation here?
Well, look, if it was for you or for people in general, because like I tend to cater what I'm doing for the person, right? So I have broad strokes that I can talk to, but for you, I would be offering one thing, but for other people, it would be offering different things. Do you know what I mean? So it's like I'm happy to go down either path. What would you like more?
I think if you offer it between us, so to me, and it's sort of
well, what I would suggest to you is that you would probably benefit from consistent conversations and engagements. I have a premium container that basically we catch up once a week, 90 minutes, digitally, where ostensibly it would be like a discussion, but it'd be sort of coaching. Now with you, it might be, we might do some writing, we might do some talking, we might do some free flow expression. Obviously, like my goal is to like bring you, like if your comfort level's here, I would like help you sort of raise it comfortably. You know, sometimes you'll go out of that comfort zone, but the idea is that we're expanding your range, right? Even before all of this, we would talk about your overall goals and sort of make sure that we're aiming in the right direction. But I'm pretty intuitive. Is that sort of making sense?
Yeah, that's making sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's sort of like you'd have your goals, but then it's also I'm sort of seeing what might benefit. So I'd be putting in those as well. So it's sort of like a dual led process, if that makes sense. It's hard to sort of pin it down, which is why this is unique to everyone, right?
Yeah.
In between those sessions, with this package, have a voice text coaching app. Do you know what Voxer is?
Voxer. I'm not too sure on that one.
Voxer. Okay, it's basically the reason I use it is because people don't know it, right? It's basically WhatsApp, but it's not known. And the reason I use it is because it's a separate space. It's not like Instagram DMs. It's not WhatsApp. It's not Facebook Messenger. It's its own space. And in that space, you can use that throughout the week to put voice or text messages in. Now, a lot of the time when I've done this with people in the past, they just express. And sometimes they want advice, but more it's just they're wanting a place to just articulate their thoughts, because the articulation of the thoughts is often the learning. You know, have you ever had a conversation with someone where you're like, expressing and then you figured it out as you've spoken?
Yeah, all the time.
That's sort of what it's like. But if there's no one to speak to, you feel like a dumbass speaking to yourself out loud, right? This is the, you know, so in between those like formal sessions, one session a week for 3 months, like 12 sessions over the 3 months, whatever, that space is open as well. So it's like, you know, free expression, talking back and forth, yada, yada. If something comes up, like for you, once again, maybe you have an interaction with a client or a customer or someone comes up and something happens and it confused you, or like, you're like, oh, hey, next session, can we talk about this? You might leave a little note in there saying like, hey, this thing happened, I want to talk about it. Or this dynamic happened, or I had this thought, or these, you know, since our last session, these words came out and flowing through me. I just needed somewhere to put it down. Do you sort of see where I'm going for with that?
Yeah, gotcha. That separate space where you can just unload all the sort of internal thoughts and experiences throughout the week, and during that next session, catch up about it.
Exactly, because like, you know, with like coaching, you go to like if you go to a therapist, it's like you have to wait and hold it all in until that session. And I'm like, that feels very constrictive to me. I want to be open and I want to express now.
Yeah,
that's how I want to open the muse up, right? And it's like I'd hate to be like, don't fucking talk to me until we're booked in. No, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's good.
So yeah, that's sort of what I'm like. And like, if you were to go down the poetry aspect, if we were to do some writing and you felt like it, I would. I'm getting a poetry collection, and if you felt like this is just like the side tangent, so maybe not necessarily for you, but maybe, if you write a poem that you're proud of, I'm going to collect people that work with me's poems, and I'm going to publish it as a collective of like, basically I'm going to call it something like Unleashed or like a poetry anthology of other people's poems that I've helped bring out. So then you'll have your poem published as well. There's there's a bunch of little things that I can go into as well. But like that's pretty much the crux of the thing that I would offer you personally.
That's pretty awesome. What do you feel like I'd get the most out of like going through the experience and going through the training?
I think you would be able to better embody communication. You'd be there would be less of a lag between what you want to speak and what you want to feel. So there might be a confidence will increase, or it might be a knowledge will increase, or it might be just like the time lag will decrease, but you will get the ability to express yourself without the self-doubt in a way that is clear and effective and evocative, either on the page or speech-wise. That's not a word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. So if it developed the self-expression to be able to flow more freely and sort of think up on the spot without sort of sitting in that sort of lag space of constantly analyzing shit as much as I do.
Yeah, I think the example would be I would help you to turn your techniques into principles.
Yeah.
That would be probably the summary. The ziplock all of those techniques into principles.
Yeah.
So then you're only holding like 4, 5, 6 principles in your mind. And then ideally you embody those principles and you're just doing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense there. I think from earlier on in a conversation, the what you're sort of talking through with like learning to let go of that sort of judgment in the mind, like sort of cutting that sort of connection to having to edit on the spot. There's a lot of value that you've got in there of guiding through that process. I think would really help.
Yeah, can definitely help.
I think something I'm personally going to think about it. At the moment, it's sort of a bit of a challenging time to sort of get in to make the sort of time for an experience like this. But I think that sort of moment's going to come up pretty soon of when this will become the right time, right place for it. So,
well, I mean, it's
knocking on your door.
Look, I'm right here. We can chat about it. It's a matter of yeah. I mean, if we talk about right time, what will make it the right time, right? It's yeah.
For me, right time will just be the getting past this starting period of a changeover. So I've come from a trade background and just finished up that business, going into basically a complete new world. And there's about sort of 6 different areas of life that are all coming to a close, and another like 50 different things that are all starting. So it's just getting past that transition.
Awesome. I'm here. Yeah. And if you find yourself like feeling that sort of feeling of like, fuck, I wish I could express and explore, right? Message me. Like that's the time to reach out, because I would suggest that communication will be at the core of everything you want to be doing, right? Like spoken communication, written communication, and the inherent confidence inside, right? So if you find yourself pushing up against a block, act sooner rather than later.
Yeah, bloody oath. I'll be knocking
You've got my details.
Yeah, bloody oath. Cool.
Look, it's been good having you on the podcast. Having being on your podcast, I do want to ask. I'm setting myself up. I've got a podcast where I'm gonna start opening up to guests. So if you're interested at some stage, we'll do this in reverse. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think that sounds brilliant. That sounds really good.
Cool. Maybe after I've worked with you for a little bit, and then we can compare back and forth. What do you reckon? Yeah,
that sounds like a plan. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I'm not ready with that space yet. I'm still opening up. Sort of figuring out like, because what I do in this podcast is like a verbal like journal sort of thing. So, but it's like it's me in this moment. But then I'm like, I'm doing that everywhere else anyway. So like, why don't I start interviewing some of the interesting people that have got offerings and ideas and concepts that might be worthwhile. So I'll, not for a while, but when I'm ready, I'll we'll make that happen too.
Yeah. That sounds pretty good.
And hopefully by then I can have a better video camera.
Set up have the whole sort of studio set up.
100%.
In the meantime, if that is a fair while away, would you be interested in having another chat sometime soon?
Yeah, we can do that. We'll work it out. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got a lot of concepts I didn't want to get into today, but there's a lot of sort of concepts would love to get your thoughts on, and sort of how you think about sort of communication in different ways.
This is exactly why we need to work together. We can dig deep on every single topic, right?
Yep.
Go as deep and as abstract. And then the benefit will be that no one will be listening. So, because like right now, right, we're both aware. No, seriously, like I try doing my best to open up and express like the deep darkness, right? But I'm distinctly aware that this is being kept in prosperity.
Yep.
So there is an aspect to playing, just like once again the coaching in a space that is private, right? Because you've got to get used to talking about it to yourself, to someone that you trust, and then to the world, right? So it's like there's stuff that I won't be able to go into publicly yet. Like, so I'm still trying to do my best to just be a free and vulnerable. But it's there's sort of that inner sort of personal work, so we can play it both ways. What do you reckon?
That sounds like a plan. Yep, absolutely.
No dramas. Love it.
Too easy. All right, mate.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Really good to have a chat with you, and yeah, look forward to catching up again soon.
No dramas. Have a good one.
You too, mate. Talk soon.
Catch up.